We've mostly been building them here in states like Kansas. And sure, that's great for Kansas, but no one actually lives in Kansas.
How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the channel. We're going to be checking out this video right here called Why We're Building a 790-mile Wire from Kansas to Indiana. So here's the original thumbnail. I live in Indiana. Kansas is in the middle of the country. And we're going to find out about a wire that is being built all the way from Kansas to Indiana. Don't have a clue why. The channel is half as interesting, is what it's called. You can find a link to that down in that description section down below. So make sure you smash that like button on your way down. And yeah, we're going to find out why they're building this wire.
The electricity powering the screen you're watching this video on was most likely just generated moments ago at some kind of power plant within a few hundred miles of you.
Okay.
Today, most electricity in the United States is still generated at natural gas or coal plants, which are great because you can build them pretty much anywhere, but are bad because of how we're all going to be dead in 15 years.
Yeah, not good for the environment for sure.
That being said, some types of power plants can't be built anywhere. Hydroelectric dams can only be built on water, for example, and wind farms can only be built where they grow wind. And in the last few years,
Where they grow wind? Wind isn't grown, it's just there, right? Maybe I'm thinking about that wrong, I don't know.
Been building lots and lots of wind farms, but as you can see, we've mostly been building them here in states like Kansas. And sure, that's great for Kansas, but no one actually lives in Kansas.
It's a lot of wind, though. That's the Great Plains. It's real flat. There's tons of wind. And yes, there's people that live in Kansas. They're called farmers.
Still uncharted territory where no man has ever dared tread. We need that electricity over here, where Dave & Buster's is. So the question is, how do you get that power from here to here? And the answer is this: the soon-to-be-built Grain Belt Express.
Okay.
Now, on the surface, the Grain Belt Express is a very simple idea. We're building a wire that goes from here to here so we can shove all the electricity in Kansas into one end and make it come out here at the other end. If that's enough of an explanation for you, then great. Just go ahead and skip to the ad read. But if you can believe it, it turns out that sending enough electricity to power 3.2 million homes halfway across the country through a single wire is actually kind of complicated.
Certainly not halfway across the country. The country's massive. That's like barely a quarter of the way, to be fair.
And if you're interested, here's how it'll work. The United States' power grid looks like this. It's actually two power grids and one infrastructural temper tantrum, but that's a whole other thing, so don't worry about that. All of these connections here are transmission lines, wires that are taking electricity from where it's being generated to where it ultimately ends up, and the vast majority of them are short or medium distance alternating current lines. That means the electricity in these wires switches direction a whole bunch of times every minute. In the United States, it's 60 times a second, in Europe, it's 50 times a second, and in Japan, it's both, which it turns out is a whole thing. The reason we use alternating current is pretty complicated, but basically it's because it's much easier to step the current up or down to fit whatever's being connected to the power grid. If we weren't using alternating current, we would need an entirely different power grid for every type of appliance. If that sounds like a nightmare, it was, because we actually used to do that.
Yeah, Edison versus Tesla back in the day. The war of the currents.
Now, here's the thing. As convenient as they are, typical AC transmission lines like this can't be infinitely long. In fact, they can only run about 155 miles or 250 kilometers between the place where the power is being generated and the place where the power ends up.
Now, why is that? Is there like an electricity like fall off? Like you can only travel so far before it's diminished or something? If you're an electrician, drop a comment. Let me know about that.
If you try to take electricity generated in the plains of Kansas and move it along one of these lines to a house in Indiana, you'd lose too much of it along the way, and now John Green can't write his next book about lepers kissing or whatever.
Okay, yeah, I was right. So it diminishes for sure.
So the question is, what can move electricity that far? Well, it's complicated. First, let's talk about how wires work. Let's say you're trying to transport, I don't know, 10 hamburgers through a tube. Or, you know what? No, they're electrons. I'm not doing an analogy for this one. Grow up. You're trying to move 10 electrons.
I'd rather hear it with the cheeseburgers, though.
I'll put faces on them if that helps, but that's it.
Okay.
Now, the electrons in an AC line are moving back and forth, and that creates a force in the middle of the wire, which has some kind of sciencey name that I'll put on screen in tiny letters for nerds to look at.
Eddy currents.
This force pushes the electrons to the outermost part of the wire, with the middle part having almost no current at all, and that makes it easier to lose more of them as heat as they travel from one place to another. This is the thing that's bad and we need to fix. You can kind of cheat this by distributing the electrons into a bunch of tiny wires that are all bundled together into one big wire, which is why most power lines look like delicious swirly pops that you, and I can't stress this enough, should not try to lick.
So that makes sense. I have wondered why they use a bunch of smaller wires instead of one bigger one. Now I know.
But if you want to get rid of this problem entirely, you need to use a whole different kind of technology to transport your electricity. And here it is. Okay, I guess that just looks like another wire, but
HVDC transmission line.
This is an HVDC line, otherwise known as an electrical superhighway. And unlike almost every other transmission line in the world, these lines move electricity as direct current in a single direction at extremely high voltages. Since they don't alternate, they generate much less heat, which ultimately means they can move electricity much, much further.
Yeah, I've seen these all over the place. They have them out in the country, going across fields and stuff.
But they're also a huge pain to build because anytime you want to connect them to an actual power grid, you have to build a giant expensive converter station that turns the direct current into the right frequency of alternating current.
Okay.
That means that these really only make sense when you need to move a lot of electricity really far away, like the North Sea Link, which moves power from rural Norway to the considerably more populous England, or the Pacific Intertie, which moves power from the hydroelectric dams in Washington all the way down to Los Angeles.
Yeah, but I've seen them. I used to live by one, and if you're under one, they buzz. There's like a staticky buzzing sound that comes from them. In fact, in the middle of the night when it's quiet out, you notice it quite loudly, honestly. It kind of freaked me out when I first found out. I didn't know what it was until I realized.
A place that people live for some reason. Soon that list will also include the Grain Belt Express, taking in wind power at a converter station in western Kansas and moving it across the Midwest.
So is there something else that looks the same that's different? Because I swear I've seen those things before. Like I've seen them.
The plan is to dump about half of that power here at a converter station in Missouri, and for the rest of it to make its way to the Indiana border, where it can continue on to the PJM grid and power all of these states in the east. This will take years of construction, archaeological surveys, land rights negotiations, and about $7 billion. But this is maybe the first time ever that I'm making a video about an infrastructure project that's actually a good idea. So honestly, I don't know how to end this conclusion. Yippee!
Yay!
Now, once again, I've written a video about America while abroad in Europe, and it literally would not have been possible without...
I just realized I looked up at the screen. You can see part of the TV behind me because the fake green screen thing. That's funny.
Our sponsor, NordVPN. I've talked about this before, but trying to access
NordVPN,
websites,
guys,
especially things like local news
oh, was that the
sites,
whole thing? All right, yeah, go check out NordVPN. Links to the original video will be in the description section down below. Then you can go there and click his link. We're going to check out some comments. It says, I actually live in a town in Missouri where the Grain Belt Express is being built through, and I'm quite disappointed to learn it's not transporting grain. Oh, that's great. It says, as a native Kansan, I can confirm that I do not, in fact, exist. Yeah, there's people in Kansas. There is. Let's see here. It says it's actually 2 power grids and 1 infrastructural temper tantrum. As someone stuck living in that tantrum, I'd say that's a fairly good description. Would love a video talking about the grids as a whole and how messed up we are down here. Interesting. It says, checkmate. The screen I'm watching this is on my phone. I haven't charged that baby in 12-ish hours, so power didn't recently come from the power plant. Very good observation, actually. Very, very interesting. All right, so that's basically that, guys. We learned a little bit today. If you learned something too, hit that like button, subscribe, and you guys have a super fun, awesome day. I'll catch you in the next one. Take care, bye.